I'm Laura Cook, and I am recording this segment for Module 3 assignment for James Ford and Sociology course. I have 4 questions I'm going to go over. I have some notes here. The first one is in regards to how would you handle a CEO and the vice president of your company if they were at odds with each other in order to make more of a fluid work environment. Um, at first, I would probably start with a little bit of a negotiation meeting, kind of pull both of them in individually in the office, talked about the productivity and some of the things that they're finding issue with, and see what kind of indiscrepancies between the two coworkers. If there's any blame on the other coworker, if there's some sort of working style that's causing the issue, listen to the complaints and kind of formulate an idea as to how to divide work up so that they don't have to either step on each other's toes or that there's defined roles for their jobs because they can have very different structured roles and only have your CNO look at financial structure of your business and things that he has the last say on, that he feels empowered in his job, that he feels like he doesn't have to actually maybe confront this person in order to get certain things done. uh, and then the vice president tell them, maybe do the same thing, evaluate what it is that they work for, this structure of the company, and talk to them about what their likes and dislikes are of the job and where they're finding issues either with the other employee or hurdles in getting things done. And then come together and say, we've redefined roles for you guys, and maybe a meeting that has the whole board or whoever is important to the situation, and make it to where it's more so a restructurization of things to where they're both appeased in some way, motivated to do their job, have the autonomy to work without worrying about the other person's opinion, and then they're still forthcoming with their information, and then decides, like, amongst a board or amongst employees based on productivity, they kind of can make those decisions with a combined perspective. So if someone's only dealing with money and the other one's dealing with people, they'll say we have this much money from the CEO, and the vice president is going to hire this many people according to that. If the CEO says, okay, well, we don't have enough money to hire that many people, the vice president will say, well, we have to readjust roles of responsibility in order to make these 5 or 6 people take on this job. So they both have say over what's actually happening, but they're both motivated in a combination of perspectives and have similar goals. And then they can produce products and justify what their organization context is. So they both have a sort of a power over what they do, but yet are doing it for the common good and still saving face with the fact that they are in a very powerful situation where they have all these people underneath them. They're still leadership roles. Take the good qualities that you find that person got them that job and just reinforce them to be able to do them freely without feeling as if they're under the construct of another person. If that's not the power struggle, there's not something that you can find that can be amicable, maybe even figuring out how you can motivate them to do better by incentivizing their job. Question number 2 was talking about different organization and structures in which we have been affiliated with, or the type of structures in which uh, organizations fall under. So I'm going to suggest that we look at the hierarchy of organization structures. So that's one type. And we're going to use a functional organization and also a horizontal flat organization. The first one I'm going to talk about is hierarchy. So much like we explained, there'll be like a president, a CEO, a CFO, and maybe a board of members that are on the top tier of management. And then they'll have some management underneath them. The, some of the pluses to something like this is that it defines roles and leaves levels of authority. It motivates employees to have clear career paths. So if they're looking to get into that hierarchy of structure and maybe go from being somebody that works in shipping to somebody that works in accounting, from accounting into marketing, from marketing on into something else, and so on and so forth. But motivating them to have a structure where they can actually be motivated to be promoted in the company. Um, Another thing is that it creates camaraderie amongst these levels. So the staff that's on the highest tier has to always organize and make sure that everybody has a role and that they're defined roles and that they come up with plans to kind of trickle down into the segments of the hierarchy. So the tier below them, defines clear motivations for their work, and they're still representing the structure of the organization. So say they were a nonprofit, they want to make sure that it looks like they're using their money adequately that's being donated because they don't make any money off of some of the things that they do. They only work based on donations or organization fundraising, things like that, so that they don't actually steer away from where they're wanting to look in the social climate, but they're actually making way and being able to fund some of the things that they're doing. The second organization I'd like to talk about is a functional organization. Well, that's where if you had, uh, like Santa's workshop, if it was actually something to make money, you'd have the tinkers and they'd have the builders, and then you'd have toy makers that make things like dolls, and they all have specific jobs. The tinkers only build things. So they're building bikes and they're waiting for parts to come in, and they only have that specialization where they do one specific job and they're dependent upon the other person in order to complete their job, much like engineers or any other construction company. You build a house, you have somebody that comes in and puts the foundation piping in. Well, the foundation can't be poured until the actual plumbing pipe fitters are in and do their job. So they're all dependent upon each other. The functionality encourages people to get done within a small time frame or the time frame allotted to them. It encourages them to do their job well because they're the only person that's specialized to do that job, whether it's 4 or 5 of them or 10 or 20, but they are specific to that job. And it encourages them to be on an independent scale, feel as if they are important because no one can do their job without them. And the downfall of some of these structures, like a functional organization, is that if you have 1 or 2 people in that in those tiers that aren't doing their job at a performance level that would be adequate, you can take the whole company out of play because you're waiting on that one piece or that one person. So it's very motivating to have people in these structures because then they know that they're important and that their timeframes are based on their productivity and keeping the company running. Another one is called a horizontal organization. It's where you and I and all of our peers would be in the same total sort of mindset. We're all on the same level of organization. We have management, but it's just somebody that individually is organizing us, not really necessarily a hierarchy or a management tier. And we all have our special job in a horizontal thing. It's much like a functionality piece where they have to have a painter come in and paint the walls before they can hang pictures. But they're all there to support each other. And that gives a motivation and sense of there is no one person that's unimportant in these organizations. Um, I personally have worked for an organization like this, and I didn't like it. And the reason being is I'm one of those people that if I'm not doing a good enough job, I'd like someone to tell me, or if I'm getting not proficient in something, I'd like to hear it from someone else, or give us structure that's very clear and concise that says, you have a deadline this day, you show up with this, and you do this, and you do that. Otherwise, I feel very unfocused and looking around and saying, well, this person took 7 days to do their job where I'm hustling and doing it for 5, or I got it done in 30 minutes and they're taking 6.5 hours. To me, it became very anxiety ridden and not as satisfying as knowing what clear definition of productivity is for me and for my peers. And socially, it can cause some conflict because there is that looking out of your bubble and seeing what other people are doing and wondering why they're not doing it like you are. And that might be just a personal preference, but I feel like a lot of times in businesses that are privately owned, you can run into that problem due to the fact that there is no actual guidance. It's just people working to function at a level to produce a product, and there is no integrity or quality that's being shown in their work or the timeline. So that was my discontent with that type of structure. Our third question is based on Our third question is based on deciding to run for a public office with little to no experience in regards to election, which would be completely on point because I've never had anything politically drive me to want to do anything in regards to an election. But I did sit as a phone caller for the last election to motivate Democrats to vote. So I can see how this could be a huge job with no experience. And what are the defined lines of what Weber's ideal for bureaucracy was and how this would motivate people to prove that you will prove to have compliance with these things. So what they want is defined roles. So if you had somebody that was out campaigning for you, you'd have a market person, a treasurer, you'd have somebody that is an office coordinator that would be documented, and there'd be a hierarchy of authority. So you would have the person running, the person that would help with PR and speaking at town halls and such and meeting with senators. You would have someone that would volunteer time to organize paperwork or make sure there was documentation stating that this is how we feel ethically and this is why we're running and our motivation for running. Those rules would regulate the following of the campaign. So there would be these people in place that would show their role and it would be defined and it would actually be documented as well. And they would all be qualified employees or volunteers. They didn't have any other association with you. They had no social background with you. They're not your best friend. You're not your sister. You're not your uncle. It would be people that were hired professionally and that did these things for other campaigns or were qualified to write speeches or that they had a prior background in the position in which they took. And there'd be no personal gain from the campaign, which is another structure of Weber's ideal. It would be the office, the computers and the phones and the papers and everything that was purchased under campaign funding that ran your office would be used for the campaign. There wouldn't be out buying a new car with this money that people donated to you or sending your children to private school. There would be nothing that could be misconstrued as misuse of funds for the campaign. So everything belongs to the campaign office and is put it back into its working self. So it would always be used for official business. Also, the employment would be organized by definition of career. Like I spoke with you before, speech writers, PR people, marketing, all of them would have defined roles, and this would all be in a loaded documents that you could be accessed by anyone, even the public. If they were to look at you and your opponent would try to say that you're doing something unethical, you would have documentation stating, nope, Joe Smith is our marketing manager. He has a history of being a marketing manager. He's ran several campaigns with a very clean record, and this is what he does for a living. He gets paid X, Y, and Z, and this is how much he's helped our organization when he was employed to and from. So there would be documentation and files, that would be Weber's ideal for bureaucracy. You would keep the campaign clean, and it would be very forthcoming in regards to the information that it stored. Our next one is employee engagement and conversation. With what we do is we would create a small group in an advertising department, and you notice that the designer is withdrawn from the meeting. And the designer is very important in advertisement. You know, your face is the name of every product that you have, and advertising and marketing is very important in order to get things to sell. So it probably, with concerns of alienation and the person not participating, I would probably take them aside and ask them if this was something that they didn't feel passionate about, if this product just didn't enthuse them, or if there was something going on between all of the board members or the people that they worked with that was causing some sort of anxiety or lack of motivation. If I couldn't get that out of that person, I would then try to motivate their participation by letting them know that I'm there to be supportive for them, but I'd like to engage them in some way by letting them have some sort of liberty, like saying, can you pick out what it is that you would think would be the best way to market this and then take it to the group and really maybe make a think tank if that would motivate them to talk more or be involved more. Thank you. This is the sociology discussion for Module 3 for James Ford, and I'm Laura Cook. Thanks.